Good day, everyone. This is Richard Clark with PwC. I'd like to welcome you to our continued webcast. Today's webcast is around visualizing SAP, driving change through enhanced reporting. I'm a partner within our SAP Risk and Controls practice, and I'll be moderating this session today. Just a quick disclaimer that I need to make sure that you're aware of. Certain matters reviewed today may represent services that PwC may be prohibited from providing to our audit clients. In those instances, the information is provided to inform you of options that you may want to consider as you evaluate the solution described on today's webcast. Independence rules are complex, and we recommend to discuss all services with you in advance within the context of the independence rules. The information contained in this document is provided as is for general guidance on matters of interest only. PricewaterhouseCoopers is not here and engaged in rendering legal, accounting, tax, or other professional advice and services. Before making any decision or taking any action, you should consult a competent professional advisor. With that stated, let me just go over a few administrative matters, certainly to make the webcast more interactive and enjoyable for you. Certainly, I encourage you to close all other applications. You certainly can enlarge the slide. You also will be able to download today's presentation. And we encourage you to submit questions throughout the presentation. We've already gotten a few questions in advance of the presentation, but we'll be monitoring questions as they come in, and we'll try to aggregate some of them so that we're answering a few of them at the same time. And certainly we'll use the CPE question time to go over some of those questions as well. Speaking of CPE credit, you do need to stay on for the duration of the program and respond to the polling questions that we're going to put out. And then at the conclusion, utilize that CPE widget to make sure that you get your PDF file which has your certificate. So if you're not logged in to this, obviously you can't receive CPE. In terms of our course objectives today, as you can see here, we're going to overview data visualization, discuss an overall approach for GRC-enabled process improvement, and certainly around those areas of GRC, you see that there's role provisioning, emergency access, SOD compliance, and internal controls. So we're fortunate today to have two of our practitioners in this area presenting. Let me just give you a brief background on each one of them. David Hodson, he's a director in our Atlanta, Georgia office. He has over 9 years of SAP controls and security experience with a wide variety of clients in the consumer products and services sector. He has worked within our practice focusing on SAP GRC process controls, segregation of duties, and compliance security assessments. So he certainly has a strong project management background, and I think you'll be able to hear some of his experiences that he has today in this area. Also joining him is Jeff Grice from Atlanta, Georgia. He's a senior associate in our practice, and he's certainly a licensed CPA with a strong background in internal controls, as well as SAP GRC implementations, security assessments, and has done a good deal of work around data visualization and leveraging that with SAP GRC 10. So I expect a pretty informative presentation today, and so I hope that you're able to get a lot out of it. And with that, we'll start with our first polling question. So our first polling question is, how satisfied are you with your existing GRC-related reporting? So we'll give you a few moments to choose one of your selections there that ranges from very satisfied to very dissatisfied, and then we'll go ahead and present you the answers. And maybe while we're waiting on that, David, maybe I'll just go ahead and throw out one of the questions that we've gotten early on. Are there any additional areas within an organization where data visualization is being leveraged?
Hey, Richard, thanks. Yes, there are. There organizations are really leveraging data visualization in a lot of different ways. Companies are using the solutions to report on sales, procurement, cash flow. Data visualization can be an effective way really in any process where the current state of reporting lacks visual components and drill down functionality. So essentially, data insights enable individuals across a business to make better decisions and to do it in a more autonomous way many times.
Great. Thanks, David. Here are the results from the polling question. It seems that the majority of the answers are falling into somewhat satisfied or neither satisfied nor dissatisfied. So those are some interesting information there. I guess, David, I'll turn the presentation over to you next as you kind of started out.
Great. Thanks, Richard. Okay, so we wanted to start off with just a high-level overview of data visualization and really why it's currently such a hot topic. So the reasons for that are really that it's providing user-driven analytics. Users can dynamically ask questions and receive answers to those questions, as I just mentioned before, somewhat autonomously. And it's easier a lot of times through visualization and quicker to gain insights that you may not have been able to gain through other reporting mechanisms. Specific to why data visualization might be relevant for you with regards to your typical SAP GRC supported business environment, sometimes the consumption of standard SAP GRC reports can be somewhat challenging, especially when your process is evolving and you're beginning to have some customized reporting requirements that maybe the out-of-the-box reports don't quite address. In addition to that, a lot of times as a part within your process, you may sort of find the need to do some advanced aging statistics and calculations that once again you can't find easily in a report straight out of GRC. And so a lot of times what happens is companies end up with routines where they pull reports out of the system, standard reports out of the system, and then have to go through sort of a manual process to maybe load it into an Access database or and do some sort of data translation to get the exact data points they're looking for, or perhaps they're leveraging Excel and some pivot table functionality to really get the reporting metrics they're looking for. So really what we're going to talk about today is just a way to maybe take that to the next level in terms of maturity. Okay, so the approach that we're gonna consider today as a possible solution to improve reporting, really, we've broken it out into 4 different phases. So really, the first phase that you're going to go through is almost like an analysis and discovery phase. So you're going to want to really define out your pain points across your processes, and you can do that through probably a lot of firsthand experience if you're very involved in the process. You can actually, facilitate some interviews with your stakeholders, and really the goal of all of this is going to be to try and understand the root causes of the pain points that you're hearing from your customers or from your process stakeholders. And so to supplement those workshops, you're probably going to do some initial analytics, and they don't necessarily need to be, fully evolved yet at this point, but you're going to want to try and bring some data points to those workshops and really start trying to figure out what are the questions and what are the issues that exist in our environment that we need to provide greater transparency to. So from that, you really get into a point where you start developing a list of requirements for the insights that you want to get out of a data visualization solution. So then from there, to kind of take it to the next level of maturity, you can begin developing a data model, what we would call a data model prototype, where you start based on the analysis phase where you've identified where your source data is, sort of what data requirements you need to support your insights. You can begin to really design out a data model that may include data translation scripts, and you're going to want to do some design around this and have the right skill sets involved in terms of the right data focused resources. And you're also going to want to figure out what business rules you need as a part of that data model. So a business rule is perhaps performing a calculation such as an SLA statistic, or giving you an aging number in terms of days possibly, or weeks, depending on what your requirements are for, say, an SOD violation. So we're going to go into a lot more detail on what that looks like here shortly. And then once you get the data model down, which is, you can almost think of as like the database layer, then from there you can start to visualize that data using a data visualization tool. And so we're going to go a lot more into what that looks like. There's lots of different tools out there that we'll talk through, but you want to go through a process where you really engage back with your stakeholders again that you started off your analysis with, and you sort of are able to socialize some possibilities with them and get to a solution that's visual, that meets the needs of your varying audiences and enables the proper decisions to be made. And then finally, the greatest level of maturity that you can kind of reach then is to set up actual automated interfaces from your target systems to your data model, and have a data visualization tool that sits on top of your data model so that the reporting is refreshed near real time and is available for your consumers really to go and access anytime they want, to draw their own insights and explore. So as Richard first mentioned, we're going to talk through 4 different areas today related to GRC. And so the first area is provisioning. So what we've kind of tried to do on this slide, you'll see kind of some tongue-in-cheek statements from different role players in a typical provisioning process. But we have the provisioning process listed out here along the bottom. So the typical process, and we just try to keep this pretty simple. It can be maybe even more complex than this in your organization, but a request is generated. There's often, hopefully at least maybe 2 different stages in a workflow for approval, one from a manager possibly, and then if you have individual role approvers of some sort. In some organizations you may also have an SOD approver specifically that is embedded in here. And then once you get through those approvals, the access is provisioned. So some common pain points that we see in our organizations, you can kind of pick up as you look at these different captions from the different players involved. Really the requesters a lot of times are maybe confused about what access they should be requesting, and then once they request it, they're not sure why it's taking so long to receive the access. So, there's just some general confusion there. And then the approvers may be inundated with too many requests, and maybe they don't really understand what they're approving. So you may have some rubber stamp approvals going on, or maybe some approvers just aren't doing their approval very timely. And then lastly, you have your security and governance team that's just kind of trying to support all these individuals and the process, and without proper insight into sort of how the process is working and what's going on, they're likely going to be a little bit frustrated as well. So we've really tried to summarize the root causes I just hit on the left here that you can kind of read through and take into account. These are just common ones. You may see them in your organization. There may be some other ones in your organization, but really what we want to get to here quickly is how enhanced reporting might be able to help. And so what we're going to walk you through right now is a provisioning dashboard, and it's really 3 provisioning dashboards. One is meant to address pending requests. So that's knowing what is sort of hung up in my process right now within my workflow. One is around SLA reporting, and then 1 is just giving us some more high-level provisioning trends. So I'm going to push to Jeff here, who's going to share his screen. And you may experience just a few seconds here for the system to buffer, but then hopefully you can see his screen.
Okay, so what we're looking at now is a dashboard. The purpose of this provisioning dashboard is to provide aging detail for requests currently pending and create accountability for the individuals responsible for taking action on that pending request. And hopefully what we can accomplish with this insight is to identify outliers that may require follow-up. So the way that the dashboard is structured, we have a breakout of pending requests by aging buckets and workflow stages. We're linking each request to the corresponding approver, and therefore we can identify who we need to follow up with if a request has been outstanding for an extended period of time. So just one example of how this can be used. We can see that Verna Elgood has quite a few requests that are currently in her queue. So we can actually drill in, and when we select her name, it's going to filter the rest of the dashboard to only present the information that's relevant to her. So we can see that of her outstanding requests, we have 36 that have been outstanding for greater than 14 days. So if we want to get the detail behind those 36 requests, we can select that layer of filtering as well. And now we have the detail that we can scroll through to identify the exact requests, the users that the access is requested for, and the role being requested, so we can follow up with Verna and maybe find out what's taking so long for these specific requests. Okay, the second dashboard that we wanted to show as an example is a dashboard that the purpose of is to create transparency within our provisioning process and facilitate SLA adherence. So what we've done is we've broken out our historical provisioning requests by workflow stage again and by approver. And what we've done is we've calculated the amount of time that it takes from once a request is initiated to the person responsible for approving to actually take action on that request. And that's what we're measuring our SLA against. So to kind of use this report, we can say, let's say we only want to look at 2014 data. We can use the filter. And again, it's dynamic, so it's going to update everything on our dashboard when we apply filters. We can select our friend Verna Elgood again, and we see that she is not only is it taking her on average 13 and a half days to approve a request, her average is going up as well. So this may represent an opportunity to follow up with Verna and kind of so we can understand why she might be taking longer than we would like for her to approve requests. Another example would be Lori Frith. If we select Lori, we can see that her average on all historical data is about 12 days to approve a request. But the good news is her SLA is improving. So during the month of April, we can see that she was around 1.89 days. So although her average is rather high, we can see that on a month-by-month trend, she is improving. And then just one other piece of functionality that we have here is we can even use, since we've presented this data at the summary level as well, we can select either all requests inside the SLA or all requests outside the SLA. And we can see who's doing well with their time to complete requests within our provisioning process also. Okay, so the third dashboard that we have is a dashboard this purpose is really to just understand broader provisioning trends. This is going to allow the user of the report to gain insight into the volume of requests available for a particular role, including a by-month trend. The way that we've structured this dashboard, we'll get an approval to rejection ratio by workflow stage. And then we've also included a master data attribute associated with the roles. So where you see the data classification for a role, that can really be swapped in and out with other master data data elements associated with our SAP roles. Okay, so to use this report, we can just scroll through our provisioning details, and we see that for company code corporate maintenance role, we have a relatively high ratio of rejections in our overall requests. So about 1/3 of the time that this role is requested, it's being rejected. So if we want to understand who is rejecting that request, we can drill into the rejections, and this might represent an opportunity to follow up with Solange and find out what the root cause is of all of these rejections. Okay, David, that's all we have on the provisioning dashboards. If you want to push to the next CPE question.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, so for our next CPE question, we're asking, does your organization currently utilize any data visualization tools?
And I'll just step in and just so that everyone knows, we did change the names and everything for the visualization information. It's Verna and Lori are made-up names, so we've changed the names to protect the innocent. While we're waiting on these results, though, David, I guess I'll ask, what type of metrics can be used as a baseline for reporting? We've gotten some questions around that.
Sure. Yep. So I think the two likely scenarios there are going to be your SLAs and your KPIs. So within your process, you really should define these within the process to align with reporting with the operational objectives of a given process. So your SLAs are usually based on some sort of agreement you've established with your customers, and your KPIs are going to be more just sort of trending metrics you want to measure yourself against, where maybe it's only carrying a certain number of unmitigated SODs within the SOD process, or maybe you actually want to keep your rejection percentage of your roles provisioned at a certain level, just to have comfort that your approvers are actually doing some level of rigor in their approval process. So those are examples of things you can kind of measure, and you can have initiatives going along with those that where you're hopefully influencing behavior, and then use those to actually see the results of your efforts, whether it's user training or approver training or something along those lines.
All right. Well, thank you. I've pushed the results, and you can see that the majority of the answers are around no real use of data visualization tools. So with that, I'll push it back to David and Jeff for the next part. Great.
Okay, so for our next process we're going to hit, it's emergency access management, and so again, just to kind of level set of what that process typically looks like. What you usually have happening is there's an incident being logged within your environment that your support team is charged with addressing in as timely of a manner as possible. And so oftentimes GRC Emergency Access Manager provides temporary access to those users to be able to go into the production environment and address the issue in accordance with their job responsibilities. So really when the issue comes in, the first step they should do is sort of perform like a triage to understand if EAM is required, If it's required, they should then proceed with the checkout and then resolve the issue during as quickly as they can while they have the emergency access checked out. And then from there, what GRC does is it actually can collect logs of the activity that were performed by the firefighters during that period for review. And so, what auditors typically want to see is really that review is occurring in a timely manner. So a lot of the times the pain points we see around this are that oftentimes the support team becomes somewhat dependent on firefighter or on EAM, and they may check it out even if they don't need to, because they feel this pressure to resolve issues in a timely manner. So you may have a common pain point we see is overuse of Emergency Access Manager, and another common root cause of that may be that those support users' base rules don't provide all the access that they should, so they feel that they're always having to do a checkout. So when your number of checkouts is going up a lot, that's going to then feed over into the log review side, where your controllers, who you see over there, are responsible for reviewing the logs, maybe get inundated with activity to review to the point where it's almost not feasible for them to perform the review. So they may feel just overwhelmed, and sometimes it may not be their first priority with all the things they have to do in a day. So sometimes they may get pretty behind on their logs, and that can turn into an audit issue. And then finally, you have your security governance team under there that's sort of trying to hold everything together and basically ensure that the control is operating and be the facilitator with the auditor when they come in and look at the process. And so, there's a decent number of pain points that we often see within that process. So I'm going to flip to the next slide here and kind of cover how enhanced reporting can help, sort of summarize those same pain points that I just spoke through on the left there. But really, examples of how enhanced reporting can address these issues. First, we could just do some usage reporting through a usage reporting dashboard. We also can look at SLAs for those controllers to make sure that there's proper accountability for them getting through their log reviews within a proper amount of time. Really, for any logs that are pending, we can get some insights into who we might need to go follow up with on that given day to initiate some review to happen. So with that, I'll flip it over to Jeff, and he can show the viewers what these dashboards may look like.
Okay, so the first dashboard that we're looking at here, the purpose is to provide firefighter usage statistics broken down by user and other relevant master data demographic elements. And what we can do here with the user of this report can gain insight into trending Tcode execution by user and firefighter ID. They can better understand the user demographics associated with this usage. We can report on the reason text to better understand the purpose of the firefighter activity. And we've also pulled in Tcode sensitivity to better understand whether the activity requires the additional governance associated with your firefighter process. So to use this dashboard, we can select the Tcode PA20 since it is the most executed on our list. We can select Joseph Saccone. And we can see that he is in the SD support group in this example. So it might warrant some follow-up to understand why someone from your SD support is executing a display HR Tcode. Another example of how this report can be used. So we can select all Tcode execution that is for Tcodes that are deemed not sensitive. So the way that this is defined in this example is straight from the access risk analysis SOD rulebook. So if we have Tcodes that aren't being monitored in our sensitive access rulebooks, then we're calling those non-sensitive, and maybe it doesn't make sense for these Tcodes to be reviewed and approved by the controller of your firefighter ID. So just the top of the list of the Tcodes that are showing up are SE11, SMQ1, SMQ2, and this might present an opportunity to better refine our firefighter user and firefighter roles to exclude those non-sensitive Tcodes. So the second dashboard that we're looking at is really designed to create better transparency within the EAM log review process and facilitate SLA adherence. The user of this report can gain insight into the average time it takes a reviewer or your firefighter ID controller to complete a firefighter log review. And we can also gain some insight into the volume of workflow items that are landing in our controller's work inbox. And with this, we're going to be able to determine whether the log review completion time is falling inside or outside of the defined SLA. So in this example, we can select our friend Joseph Saccone again. And we can see that he only has 14 total workflow items. It's taken him on average 54 days to complete. So maybe that's an opportunity for Joseph to speed up the process. On the other hand, we can select Vernita Livesey, and we see that she has almost 2,200 log reviews in her queue. So her average is 17.94. Maybe this represents an opportunity to move some of those workflow items into another person's queue and alleviate some pressure from Vernita. The third dashboard that we're looking at is designed to create transparency into the EAM log reviews currently pending. We are going to, again, have the number of days that each request has been outstanding. And what we are able to do is drill in and get the detail behind the log reviews that are currently out there. So when we select Vern again, what we're now able to do is follow up with Vern with the exact list of the workflow items outstanding currently and push those through to completion. And with that, David, we're ready to move to the next CPE question.
Okay, great. Okay, so for our next CPE question, what data visualization tool does your company utilize, if any? Is the question.
And David, while we're waiting for those results to come in, we have gotten some questions in terms of can this technology be applied when other tools are used to manage the firefighter process?
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I'll actually let Jeff take this one for change.
So the answer to that question would be yes. The same principles for reporting on the firefighter usage can be applied regardless of which solution is in place to monitor the process. Really what's key here is the availability of your usage data and the reporting data model. As long as those two prerequisites are met, data visualization can be leveraged for enhanced reporting regardless of the solution that's in place.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. All right. Well, let's see what these results are. So it looks like we've got a multitude of answers with the greatest being multiple data visualization tools used. So with that, maybe, David, I'll come back to you. I know y'all are going to look at segregation of duties now.
Yeah. Thanks, Richard. Okay, so kind of sticking with the same format we have going here. This is, a typical SOD process. which I imagine is probably maybe the most familiar to everyone on the call. Really, when an SOD occurs, you first sort of analyze whether or not you can apply mitigating control. Really, the first thing you want to ask is this SOD, in terms of each side of the conflict, necessary for job responsibilities? And if the answer to that is no, really the best solution then is to remove one, if not both, of the two sides, depending on whether it's both or just one of them, to remove the SOD. If it is required for job responsibilities, or maybe it's difficult to remove because of the role model, then you want to analyze and evaluate whether or not you have a mitigating control that can address the issue. So if the answer to that is yes, then you're going to want to apply that mitigating control in GRC to take credit for it. And you're going to want to have a process in place where you, on a somewhat frequent basis, come back and evaluate whether that mitigating control still makes sense over time. So in terms of the pain points we see with this, flip the next slide here. We typically see issues in which it's just a lot of times the security team maybe gets the request to remove access for an SOD, and they don't feel like they're enabled to do so because they don't understand whether or not the user is using the access, and whether maybe it relates to another function that isn't necessarily completely tied out to the SOD that's in mind. Some other pain points we typically see are related to mitigating controls. So a lot of times companies have gotten pretty mature in not carrying very many unmitigated violations, but they've mitigated a lot of violations away, and they may not have it top of mind to really stay on top of the appropriateness of those violations, those mitigated violations over time. That's another way enhanced reporting can help, is sort of providing some transparency into your mitigated violations. And then sometimes maybe the unmitigated violations just aren't going away as quickly as maybe, say, your financial controls team or those charged with financial reporting oversight might want to see them go away. So just providing transparency to that, establishing ownership, and having reporting that can really make that clear and drive accountability and keep people improving in those areas is really the aim here. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Jeff.
Okay, so the first SOD dashboard that we're looking at, the purpose here is to provide a snapshot of all mitigated risk violations and include user demographics for better context. So this is going to allow the user of the report to better understand the root cause of the violations, or maybe target specific areas for remediation. One feature of data visualization that's always nice to have is the region, so we can actually view our SOD violations by country. So to use this report, we can, again, let's filter on our high-risk violations. Let's say we only want to include our SOD violations, not our sensitive access tests. And we'll select the most mitigated violation. So if this violation exists 1,400 times and it's mitigated every time, is it truly high risk? So the next dashboard that we're looking at is for our access risk violations that are currently unmitigated. So this is going to be similar functionality to the mitigated risk violations dashboard, and we're going to be able to drill in based on our user demographics. So again, we have our SODs selected and our high-risk violations. We can also select a specific country to understand the risks that are unmitigated by country. And then we're also pulling in the manager of these individuals so that we have someone to follow up with for remediation. Okay, and the next dashboard that we're looking at is our Mitigating Control dashboard. So this is a report on mitigating controls applied to violations that are where the mitigating control is currently expired or it's about to expire. And what we're going to have with this report is the ability to provide insight required for the users of the report to follow up with individuals or groups responsible for assigning our mitigating controls. So these are the mitigations that are out there that currently require some action. So to use this report, we can select a specific SAP user group, for example. And we now have the detail of the user violation, the control that's assigned, the access risk ID, etc. And when we select the control, we're also going to be able to drill in and get the status of that control to help make us a better decision about whether to assign the mitigating control. Okay, so the next dashboard that we're looking at is for violation Tcode usage. So what we have here is our SAP access risk violations broken out by SAP user groups. And we're also pulling in the access risk ID and the function description, as well as Tcode execution. So to use this report, we can select a specific SAP user group. So we'll select Product Supply Russia. And for Carmilla Fair, we can see that for access risk ID XX19 and XX20, she is using the Tcodes that are causing that violation. However, when we look at access risk ID XX46, we see that she is not currently using the Tcodes associated with that violation. So this might represent an area for pretty quick remediation or cleanup. And the final dashboard that we have as an example in your SOD process is just a higher level dashboard that might be relevant at the management level. So we've broken out our SAP user groups into specific geographies, and we have just a couple critical data elements that are significant at maybe at the management level. So we have critical risk violations, and we have violations that have been unmitigated for greater than 90 days. So to use this report, we can select, we'll look at the product supply SAP user groups. And we see that we have one critical risk out there in this user group, and we see that we have one violation that's currently outstanding for greater than 90 days, and we have the manager responsible for those violations that we can follow up with to hopefully correct these unmitigated violations. And with that, I'll pass it back over to David.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, so the last area we wanted to cover was some of the process challenges around internal controls reporting. And so really the idea here is that a lot of times, especially in larger organizations where you have different regions and it's sort of a complex internal controls organization where there's just a lot to track in terms of issues, control attributes, control owners, it can become difficult to sort of keep the proper higher level big picture understanding of your risk. So really how enhanced reporting can help is really, it can be used to sort of drive standardization and automation to create efficiencies by giving you those insights so that you can really start to develop a plan and track against the plan and monitor your progress to move that way in terms of your control structure. In addition to that, it can really, as I just mentioned, help you evaluate and understand your risks with maybe some new insights that you just didn't have before. So in terms of how enhanced reporting can help in this area, there's really, kind of three primary options that we have here. We're only really going to cover one of them in terms of the demonstration today for time's sake. But you can do some dashboards around just your typical control attributes. So things like, is it, how many preventative controls do I have versus detective or automated versus manual, maybe centralized versus decentralized, and even work in some accountability there with how many controls a particular control owner might be responsible for. So just so you can kind of get a higher level view across your complex organization of your control structure. Some other opportunities might be historical audit issue tracking. So being able to have in your data model several past years of your audit issues, so you can look at trending over time, and maybe even you want to look at by location to see how different locations have maybe improved, or maybe there's some degradation there over time. And then the last dashboard that is somewhat common that we would do would be deficiency reporting for your current year issues. So less about the historical issues, but just monitoring and tracking what your current year issues are. And really the aim there is going to be to make sure that your remediation efforts stay on track and that you're prioritizing your efforts appropriately. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Jeff.
Okay, so the dashboard that we're presenting now is going to be just an interactive view of some of the typical control matrix attributes that we find in a lot of environments. So what we've basically done is just taken our control RCM attributes and pulled them out into an interactive view. And again, we're going to have that drill down functionality. So we can, in this example, we'll select all of our SOX controls. We'll select the general ledger and closing process. And we get the detail of the control references that are associated with that process. And really what we're doing here is we're just replacing that static view of maybe an Excel spreadsheet that currently houses our RCM, and we're introducing some drill down functionality. Okay, David, I think we can flip back over to the slides now.
Great. Yeah. So that is going to conclude our demonstration for the day. We're going to just go through a few more slides about data visualization to wrap up here in the next 10 minutes. We have a few more CPE questions for you guys. But I know what a question might be, a lot of people are asking as they see all this, is what does enhanced reporting data model look like? So this is an example of one where you would have your target systems. You see there along the bottom. So GRC is going to be, in this example, it has the majority of files, and that's going to be the case many times in terms of where your source data is coming from. Then you may be pulling some additional tables, especially for the more complex analytics from your actual different target systems in your environment. And then, especially on the user attribute side, which you've seen throughout all these dashboards, you may need to go to another source outside of even those systems. So you may get some user attributes from your AD environment, or perhaps you have an IDM solution that houses a lot of your user attributes. So when you're able to bring those in, things such as a user geography, or maybe it's their functional department, it really enables you to do more in terms of the insights you're going to drive across all of these processes. So once you have kind of figured out where the data sources are coming from to feed your data model, which you see then in the top left, then you actually put together the data model, which is where honestly a lot of the majority of the effort is in an undertaking of implementing this enhanced reporting. And so in this example, we say this is a SQL Server data mart, but just want to be clear to make the point that it really is agnostic. You could have an Oracle database, you could have in a lot of environments maybe SAP BW makes sense to store this data if you're a heavy SAP shop. But the key thing is that you're basically getting this source data into the data model, You are applying business rules to it to perform your additional calculations to meet all the requirements of your insights, and you're essentially creating a new data model that sort of has this pristine set of tables for which you can then put your data visualization on top of. So in this example here, we have the data visualization tool is Tableau, but just to be clear, you could use really any of the tools that are out there, and we'll flip through those in just a minute to give you an overview of the different tools that are out there. But this is just an idea of how you get from really, sort of an environment with lots of different data sources that you need to kind of all put together to the types of dashboards that we looked at today. Okay. So with that, we're going to do our fourth polling question. So based on the 4 domains presented today, where do you think your organization would benefit the most from enhanced reporting through data visualization?
And Jeff, maybe while we're waiting on those answers, just a little bit of information around what's the level of complexity associated with establishing that data layer?
Okay, sure. That's a great question, and it really is going to be dependent upon the level of complexity associated with your reporting. The data layer for a dashboard can be as simple as a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, or as complex as a thorough SQL or Oracle database. So your data visualization tools essentially are going to give you some flexibility in the format that the data being reported on is staged in, and it's really just going to depend on the complexity of your organization's requirements.
Thanks, David. All right. Well, let's see what these results are. So, all right. Well, very interesting. Segregation of duties and internal controls with everything we've touched on each one of those today. So those two are the leaders. So, David, let me pass it back to you to maybe talk about some of those best practices that you were mentioning earlier.
Sure. Yeah, we thought we would just pad this out with just some more higher level information on the data visualization component. So really, just in terms of the proper process to go through, and this would really be for that dashboard prototyping phase we talked about. The key objectives you want to keep in mind as you go through the process is, one, keeping in mind what the objective of the dashboard is. So it's very easy to get lost in these statistics and sort of start, putting different graphs up there, and you can quickly it can get out of control on you. So establishing what the objective of it is and kind of trying to keep that in mind as you go will really help you stay on track. And another way to maybe ask that same question is, what action do I want to be driven off of these dashboards? We found that to really help us kind of stay honed in as we piece these things together. So another really important aspect of it is identifying who the audience is. So obviously, if it's a more executive level audience, you're going to want to keep the dashboards a little bit more simple and higher level and to the point. If you're building some dashboards for maybe some power users in an organization that have some sort of stake in the process, they may want a lot more detail and a lot more ability to really drill into things. So really, those are some things to keep in mind as you go through the process. So, just for reference, if anyone's interested in kind of learning more about all the different data visualization tools, Gartner released their BI Magic Quadrant back in February, so just a few months ago for the latest one. So it's maybe kind of hard to read on the screen, but it's definitely a source that we'd recommend you can check out to really get some perspective on the different tools that are out there. And on the next slide, we kind of drill into some of the most popular ones per Gartner. So what we actually went through with our dashboard today was Tableau, but there's some other options out there. A lot of people, I'm sure, have heard of ClickView, Spotfire, MicroStrategy. They all can really achieve the results that we were presenting on today. just more as a reference slide, we've put some of the common benefits and additional considerations for each of the tools and maybe some triggers for each of the tools in terms of trying to figure out if it's the right one for your organization. So I won't go through these today, but it's here for reference if you're interested. And lastly, we just wanted to kind of round it out with some final best practices about building a dashboard. And so we kind of covered some of these already, but really it's just making sure you think through the story you're trying to tell and really understanding how your users will interact with the information. And so once again, having that prototype phase built into your approach really helps here, because as you take a tool like these data visualization tools around to your stakeholders who would be involved in these processes and actually let them maybe play around in the tool a little bit to figure out what kind of insights they want to try and drive out of it, you'll get a lot of great feedback. And, every audience or every stakeholder is going to have sort of their own objective in using the dashboard. So the more of their input you can get, the more it'll be viewed as a value add for the organization. Typically, just general rule, you place the most important information to the top or left, and people a lot of times kind of go from, just like you read a page in a book from top left down. You want to try and keep the interface simple, and you can use multiple dashboards like we were doing today, to tell one story. And the way they can filter off each other really is where a lot of the power is. And that brings us to our final polling question. So which of the following choices best represents your most desired or already realized benefit from data visualization? That's the question.
And David, I know we mentioned this at the beginning, but just to make sure everybody knows that this webcast will be available to folks, right?
Yes, Richard, it will be. It may be a couple of days till the link gets posted online, but it will be available, and we actually have a reference to the link, I think, on our final slide coming up here, so everybody can take note of it.
Great. Okay. All right. Well, we'll give people a few more seconds to answer in, and then we'll see the results. All right, let's see. And so it looks like ability to access and query real-time data as well as to identify new trends seem to be the leading answers. So, okay. Very, very good information. And so what we've done throughout the presentation, we've been taking in some of the questions. We've been able to try to incorporate them into, during the polling questions, some of the questions that we're seeing, as well as during the presentation, trying to answer them with real-time feedback. So I think we've tried to address as many as we can. Certainly, if you have follow-up questions, you're welcome to reach out to Jeff, David, or myself, and we'll certainly try to share our perspective. In terms of this information, this has our contact information. As I said, you're welcome to reach out to us, and that way we can follow up with you. So. And then I think here is, as we mentioned, that the webcast will be available for replay, and here you see the link. And as you know, this is a part of our continuing series of webcasts, and so here are some that we are looking to have in the future in terms of a guide to SAP HANA Analytics for SAP GRC and GRC PCAC integration. So do be looking for those topics. And for those of you who did ask a question, and if we weren't able to answer it, then we will actually be following up with you as well. So again, that brings us to the top of the hour. I want to thank you for your time, and we'll go ahead and close out the call here. This is the actual survey button, which you click on so that now you're able to take that and then get your CPE certificate. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it, and we'll bring the webcast to a close. Goodbye.